Okay, welcome back to the last video lecture in Unit 2. Today we focus on the Supreme Court under the leadership of one of the most important Chief Justices in American history, John Marshall. Under the leadership of John Marshall, the Supreme Court established its power as the interpreter of the nation's laws and of the Constitution, and also of the supremacy of the federal government over the states. To illustrate this, we will focus on three critical Supreme Court cases in early American history. The first case is Marbury versus Madison in 1803. The background of this case was this. Shortly before he left office, President John Adams appointed a Federalist, William Marbury, as a Justice of the Peace for the District of Columbia. Adams filled out and signed the appointment documents, but left it for the incoming president, Thomas Jefferson, to actually carry out the appointment. Not wanting to place a Federalist on the court, Jefferson told his Secretary of State, James Madison, not to deliver the papers. William Marbury then asked the Supreme Court to force Madison to deliver them, basing his request on the Judiciary Act of 1789, which said that requests for federal court orders go directly to the Supreme Court. The details of the case are not as important as the ruling and the outcome. The Supreme Court ruled that the part of the Judiciary Act which Marbury cited was in fact unconstitutional. This ruling established for the first time that the Supreme Court had the power of judicial review. In this sense, Marbury v. Madison was the grandfather for all subsequent Supreme Court cases. The next case, McCulloch v. Maryland in 1819, involved the National Bank, which hopefully you recall was first established by Alexander Hamilton. The bank was unpopular amongst Democratic Republicans, especially in the South, who felt that the bank itself was unconstitutional, since the power to create a national bank was never explicitly mentioned in the Constitution. In 1818, the state of Maryland passed legislation taxing the Maryland branch of the Second National Bank. The cashier of the bank, James McCulloch, refused to pay the tax, arguing that a state did not have the authority to tax the federal government. The decision of the Supreme Court in this case had two important components to it. First, the court ruled that under the Necessary and Proper Clause, aka the Elastic Clause, the federal government did have the implied powers to establish a national bank. Secondly, although the states did have the power to tax, they could not interfere with instruments of the federal government. This decision reinforced the supremacy of the federal government over the state. The last case was Gibbons v. Ogden in 1824. This case involved a company that had been granted a monopoly by the New York State Legislature to control all steamboat traffic in New York waters. When the company tried to expand the monopoly into New Jersey, the matter went to the Supreme Court. The court declared that the monopoly was unconstitutional. Marshall noted that the Constitution gave the federal government control over interstate trade. In all of these cases, there is one common theme: the supremacy of the federal government over the states. As a result, the power of the federal government continued to grow. I hope you enjoyed this part of the video lecture series. We'll see you in the next unit.